Welcome to Crossroads, a show by the Epoch Times, one of America's largest independent newspapers. Now, if you want to support our show and get the word out, well, please hit the like button, leave a comment, share this episode, let us know what you think about it. Now look, Russiagate is back. The whole big scandal from way back when, the one that they tried to remove Trump from office with and even prosecute him with. It's back, but this time the entire narrative is upside down. It's flipped. The Trump administration is now alleging the 2016 scandal was itself disinformation. Remember, the narrative was that Trump worked with Russia to create disinformation to rig the election. It turns out that narrative was actual disinformation. And they're also saying evidence was misrepresented in order to clear the way to investigate then presidential candidate Donald J. Trump. The Epoch Times says this: the FBI and the National Security Agency, the NSA, in the heat of the 2016 election dissented from an intelligence community assessment which judged that Russia was behind the alleged hack of the Democratic National Committee servers and the subsequent release of stolen emails. As you might remember, there were allegations that hackers breached the DNC servers, stole a bunch of emails, and then gave them to WikiLeaks, right? That was the narrative. Turns out that may not have happened. It says here the FBI and NSA instead had low confidence in the attribution to Russia, according to a September 12, 2016 intelligence community assessment released to the public for the very first time on July 18, 2025, just recently. It says, as part of a batch of records declassified by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the ODNI. Now it says a memo prepared for President Barack Obama, dated 2 days after the assessment, blames Russia for the hack and leak and does not mention the dissent by the FBI and NSA, according to the newly released documents, meaning the fact the NSA and FBI did not really agree with it was not included in that report. Now it says the revelation is the latest twist in the decade-long controversy over the DNC hack, which lies at the very root, the core issue, right, of the now discredited Russia collusion narrative. We know it's fake, right? We know it's fake because John Durham, former special counsel, investigated it, determined that it was not in fact true. It was all fake. But that the result of everything that happened, it was a result, he said, of confirmation bias. People heard it was true, believed it was true, and just wanted it so bad to be true that they just went along with it. And they note the narrative ensnared the nascent Trump administration in 2017 and metamorphosized into the special counsel investigation by Robert Mueller. Remember, it's Mueller time, and they were trying to remove Trump from office using that. And notes that Mueller concluded the investigation with no evidence to support the claim that Russia colluded with then candidate Donald Trump to influence the election, which you were told for, 6 years? It says the hacking of the DNC was central to the collusion narrative. The FBI's having low confidence that Russia was behind the breach is significant. Why? It says because the Bureau had received 3 weeks prior to dissenting with the assessment, guess what? The final report on the hack by CrowdStrike, the private cybersecurity firm hired by the DNC to remediate the hack in the spring of 2016. It says the CrowdStrike reports have never been made public. The company's then president, Sean Henry, told the House Intelligence Committee in late 2017 that his firm had no evidence that files were stolen from the DNC systems. Again, what happened was the DNC hired a private cybersecurity firm, CrowdStrike, to investigate the alleged hacking of their servers. What we were not told in some of these reports is that they never in fact found evidence that a hack had taken place. This would not come to a surprise for everybody. As I mentioned at the time, I was in fact, one of my beats was cybersecurity, and I noted even at that time in my own reporting that the reports coming out did not actually show evidence that the servers were hacked. There was no evidence of an actual cyber attack that breached the servers or stole information. Rather than do that, the public assessments that were released, instead of having an actual forensic analysis, which normal cybersecurity reports have, they just explained hypothetically how cyber attacks work. I had never seen a report done like that before. It was very weird. But it says this, though. The newly released documents show that by December 7, 2016, 2 months after accusing Russia of hacking the DNC, the U.S. intelligence community was still relying on CrowdStrike's analysis for its assessment. And this was something that was also known, just not widely reported. We reported it. But it turned out there were no actual agency investigations into the alleged hacks. They just merely used an organization that was hired by the victims, right, the DNC, and used their assessment. The agencies themselves did not actually do the investigation and just went along with it. And it turns out that they themselves, at least NSA and FBI initially, did not even really believe that it was true. And that was, of course, redacted from the assessments that were provided to the president at the time. Now look, there are now suggestions people involved in creating and spreading the Trump-Russia narrative that they could even face criminal charges. Now, like, we'll see if that ever happens. That'd be a big deal. Some would argue that, as ironic as it is, the many criminal charges of President Donald Trump over the last few years, remember how many times President Trump was accused of crimes and targeted, that those actually established the precedent for similar charges against everybody else. Maybe they didn't count on that happening, but the doors are open for that. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, she even laid out the case of how top officials in the Obama administration could have been involved. And in many of their public posts, they're suggesting they may even move to criminally charge some of them. Now, we'll see if that happens. We'll see if those stand up. Because as we saw with Trump, right, remember they did find Trump guilty of some stuff, but it is very difficult to actually do anything with it. We'll see where it goes. Get ready for a wild ride because it's just beginning. What you're watching is the beginning, not the end of a brand new scandal. On another point, though, the FBI also has something big going on. They're now having to release the names of all the agents who were in any way involved in the cases around January 6th. And this is a big deal because there were around 500, estimated 500 FBI agents who were involved in some way with the investigations, the arrests, the raids, maybe even just on a small level, with prosecuting, investigating all the Trump supporters who were in or around the Capitol building on January 6th. And of course, the narrative that they raided the Capitol building. Trump pardoned all the J6ers, or at least gave them, at the worst, gave them some kind of partial pardons. Every agent who was involved with targeting them now could have their names released publicly. This is going to be controversial because there's concerns they could be targeted. On the Trump side, they're suggesting they want to fire all of them. So we'll see what happens. The Hill said this: a federal judge agreed Thursday to a request by the Trump administration to dismiss a lawsuit that sought to block the release of the names of thousands of FBI agents who worked on January 6 cases. Now it notes, U.S. District Judge Gia Cobb, an appointee of former President Biden, expressed sympathy for agents who went to court seeking limitations on the Trump administration after the Justice Department demanded a list of all who have done investigative work on the cases of rioters. They're calling them rioters. Not, some of them were, some of them weren't, but they're calling them all rioters. And they say this, quote, plaintiffs filed these cases in a whirlwind of chaos and fear, Cobb wrote, adding that some former January 6 defendants, now pardoned and at large, called for FBI agents to be doxxed or worse. Doxxed means, of course, you release their private information, maybe their home address, you release their identities. And remember, the concern with that is people harass them, people threaten them. Whether that's going to be the majority or not, that is a very real element in today's world. People probably will target some of them. And they add this, quote, since then, the dust has settled some and the case has evolved. Cobb continued. And it notes that FBI agents have been in court since February, filing the case shortly after 8 top career FBI officials were fired. And Principal Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove, now nominated for a lifetime appointment to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, demanded the list. They want the names. But Cobb determined the Justice Department does not appear poised to act on agents' fears that a list would be used not only to fire agents, but publicly release their identities as an act of retribution. Let's talk about where that's going, right? This is pretty big, right? Basically, there's talk the Trump administration, probably at the very least, they will investigate to an extent, but probably fire every single agent involved in any way in the cases tied to January 6th. Now, is that fair? Many of them would say, I was just following orders. Some would say that people just following orders are the reason bad things happen in the world sometimes, just put it that way. That is not necessarily a way to get off the hook if you did something wrong. Others would say that they were totally in the right, that they were actually going after rioters and people who tried overthrowing democracy itself and ending the American Republic and rigging the election and keeping Trump as king of the United States for eternity, that he would find a way to biohack himself and stay there forever. But of course, if you would boil down all of these narratives into what is actually what's taking place, it's this. There were some agents, of course, who were more directly involved, some who were not very involved. All of them now risk losing their jobs. That does not mean the Trump administration is going to publicly dox, 5,000 agents, but they might release the identities of some of them. And on the Trump side, in Trump's eyes and in the eyes of many people in his administration, remember there's even former J6ers who are part of the administration now, they believe that these individuals targeted them, that they themselves were violating their oaths, and that as oath breakers, that they went against the things they're supposed to stand for, targeted Americans, used some somewhat nefarious means, in some regards yes, in some regards no, and that at the very least they should maybe be moved to different positions, if not fired. Some of them might have their identities revealed if the Trump administration moves to criminally prosecute some of them or make examples of some of them. And that would set them up to be targeted, harassed, and at the very least publicly shamed. At the same time, of course, there are concerns that agents could be in danger. Will this put people's lives at risk? We don't know. But again, there are a few sides to this. We'll see where that goes. It is moving through. The Trump administration on its side, they're even trying to they're probably going to do it. They're moving to overturn even some of Biden's pardons. If that happens, it could clear the way to investigate the investigators of January 6th. And I would say across the board right now, what you're watching is the entire narratives of the last 4 or 5 years getting flipped on their heads. And the people who were targeting Trump and going after him are now finding themselves targeted. Now, is that justice or is that retribution? Is this an angry man going after the people who tried targeting him, or is this just justice? You be the judge of that. But we're now watching it take place. Justice is now going the other way. Now, in other news, though, a site that next to a key U.S. water supply system has just been purchased, right? A big portion of America's water supply. You need it for crops, you need it for drinking, and now, well, a Chinese company has decided that it needs it to make drinks and who knows what else, in China's interests. I'll be talking more about this after we come back from a quick break.
All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment. You are, of course, watching Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. I'm just here to share a message about American Hartford Gold, my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, obviously, the recent tariffs have made the markets super turbulent and volatile. With every new piece of tariff news, the markets seem to either crash up or crash down. And of course, it's worth mentioning that these conditions don't only affect Wall Street. They affect all of us through our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a company that I trust and I myself use to secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move our assets into something tangible, into something you can actually hold, which is physical gold and physical silver, two precious metals that act as a hedge against all those decisions being made in Washington, D.C. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your door, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive offer. When you call them today and you mention the name Joshua, you could receive up to $15,000 in free silver with your initial investment. Take advantage of their special offer. You can either just call them at 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. All their information will also be down in the description box below. And now, back to Crossroads.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, make sure to hit that like button and help us get the show out to more people. It actually really does help the show. Now look, a site next to a U.S. water supply system has been bought up by a company owned by one of China's richest men. Newsweek said that China's largest beverage company, Nong Fu Spring, has bought a site in Nashua, New Hampshire, next to the Pennachuck water system. They can access it. They're not necessarily buying the water system, but they can access it. Now notes the firm owned by China's richest man, Shan will have access to the local water for its plant, News Nation reported last month. And it says, as you might imagine, this has caused alarm among locals and politicians who say most people in Nashua are unaware of the sale. The property site sits next to infrastructure critical to Nashua's drinking water system. That could be problematic if this company is discovered to have ties to the Chinese Communist Party. And notes that while Nong Fu Spring has not yet outlined plans for extraction or bottling, its ownership and the company's global strategy focused heavily on exporting bottled water have drawn scrutiny. It says Stag Industrial Holdings LLC, a real estate investment trust, sold the land to NF North America, a subsidiary of Nong Fu Spring, on January 31st, according to the Hillsborough County Register of Deeds, reviewed by New Hampshire newspaper, the Keene Sentinel. And the property, it says, a 337,391 square foot single-story building on 23 acres at 80 Northwest Boulevard, which has not been used for 11 years, was bought at 4 times more than its assessed value, $67 million, despite its being valued at $15 million by the city of Nashua. On that point, that's very common for Chinese companies to do. When they go and try to buy up American farmland or American properties, they oftentimes bid way above the asking price. And what does that do? It makes the buyer say, you know what, I probably will not get a better deal than this, and they sell it. And by doing so, raise national security concerns for the entire United States. Now, notes this. It is near Nashua Airport, some defense centers, and a Federal Aviation Administration control center. So, national security concerns, water supply concerns, and just concerns over us selling off America for foreign interest. Now, look, under the Chinese Communist Party, so this is an investment firm that tied in with a beverage company. If you have a company, all right, my take, if you have a company that makes bottled water and they buy a site for who knows what next to a major water supply that gives them access to that water for potential bottling, what might your conclusion be on why they're doing it? If they bid 4 times the asking price and they really want it, well, you might assess that they're probably going to use the water for their product that they of course have. But the other important thing I'd say with this is that in China, foreign investment needs a green light from the CCP. If you're an investment company and you do foreign investment, any kind of direct foreign investment, it has to be cleared by the Chinese Communist Party. There is no such thing as a company that does that being free from the influence of the Chinese Communist Party. Now, is this going to be reviewed by CFIUS, which in the United States reviews, foreign purchases for potential national security risks? I haven't seen any mention of that yet. This doesn't seem to be raising big alarms yet, but locally it is. We'll see if that changes nationally. But look, it's not even just there. It's not just farmland, it's not just water, it's a lot of other things. As all of this happens, other Chinese purchases have come under scrutiny, and now Chinese purchases of American homes are raising alarms. They're buying up houses. Fox Business said a surge of international buyers, mainly from China, have picked up homes in the U.S. over the past year, They're doing it all at once, it seems, as U.S. households continue to face mounting challenges in the market. What's happening right now? A lot of houses are going onto the market, whether that's people being deported or people moving from one place to another. Maybe they're fleeing California, or even in Florida, actually, where people are moving to. You have a lot of houses going on the market. That's creating a surge of new homes in the market, and there was a surge of people buying up those homes. It says the number of existing homes purchased by foreign buyers from April 2024 to March 2025 increased for the first time since 2017. In other words, Trump came into office first term, a lot of those purchases stopped, and now they're restarting. And that's according, they say, to a recent report from the National Association of Realtors, NAR. The report highlights that Chinese buyers represented the largest portion of foreign investors in terms of total spending and transaction volume, purchasing $13.7 billion worth of existing homes, an 83% increase in the prior year. It notes that is a significant uptick from the $7.5 billion worth of purchases in the prior year, according to NAR. These buyers also have the highest average purchase price at $1.2 million, with the majority of purchases being concentrated in states with hefty price tags. For instance, about 36% of Chinese buyers purchased a property in California, right? Where, as I mentioned, people are moving to Texas or Arizona, meaning their houses are going to the market, or they're moving back to who knows where. They're leaving the country voluntarily or involuntarily. It says, well, 9% purchased property in New York, according to the report. Why does this matter? Well, look, aside from the issue of potential national security threats, like the Chinese Communist Party buying up all of our assets, farmland, water supplies, our houses, this also causes a rise in the price of homes. Now, normally what happens if you deport, I don't know, 1 million people, 10 million people, 20 million people, whatever Trump's aiming for, it means that you have all the houses they were in go on the market. Now, what happens with that? Well, the prices of homes go down. Some people love it, some people absolutely hate it. If you're a potential home buyer and you want to buy a house, this is fantastic for you. It means you can actually afford a home for once. If you're a real estate company, if you're a bank, if you're somebody who just owns a lot of properties, you probably hate it because it means that the assets you've invested in are suddenly devalued. And so it is in the interest to keep the prices high. Now, that's hard to do when people are leaving the country, right? Now, in some countries, they've blamed this effectively on foreign purchases and on mass illegal immigration. If you bring in 10 million people from another country, what do they need? They need homes, they need food, they need jobs, hopefully, or they need foreign investment and welfare, which you pay for. Canada was actually dealing with this. And Canada, because they were facing people in Canada couldn't afford to buy homes, the prices of real estate were just going through the roof, they restrict there's a lot of regulations in Canada around the environment that restricts the building of new homes. And so what happens when you have a finite number of houses and foreigners are buying them up? Well, it means that, again, supply and demand, if you have limited supply, massive demand, the prices go through the roof and people were becoming homeless. Canadians could not find a place to live. Now in Canada, they actually blamed that on mass migration and on foreign purchases. A big part of that was actually Chinese buyers. And, it also included people from other countries. You had a lot of Indian migrants come here and their family members were buying properties and sometimes just sitting on them and not even using them. Now, what that caused in Canada was the unaffordable state where people just couldn't even afford to live. The only other option was to put more money into the MAID program, right? But the reasoning that Canada had and why this was happening was the same as here, right? Housing costs go through the roof, and actual Canadians were not able to afford their homes in their own countries. Same exact thing happening here. And so what Canada did, they actually put laws in place to make it so that foreigners cannot buy homes in Canada. A very interesting move. A very interesting move for a country that is to the left of America's left for the most part in terms of the political spectrum. They tend to be very far left. And of course, very open borders, very, whole 9 yards with that. The fact that they would actually forbid foreign purchases of their homes is interesting. In Canada, it was deemed foreign purchases, mass migration is what caused a spike in housing prices. And the government there actually took steps to prevent that. They've banned foreigners from buying homes. Will America do the same? Will we allow foreigners like Chinese investors to mass purchase homes in the United States to artificially maintain the high price of homes? Or will we forbid it? We'll have to wait and see. But the interesting thing right now is that Chinese investment, Chinese purchases, Chinese monopolies, all of this, almost across the board, is coming into focus. Now, I'd ask a clear question. If you were to remember, the CCP is, owned and led by the Chinese Communist Party. They're a communist country. If you're part of the CCP, you have to read Karl Marx and Mao Zedong. You have to join study sessions. You have to do self-criticism sessions. You have to pay the CCP money, like doing your tithe on Sundays, only to a communist state. Meaning the Chinese Communist Party is, surprise, led by the Communist Party. And what is one of the goals of communism? Well, as Karl Marx said, to seize the means of production. Now, what are the means of production? A lot of us think of factories, but the means of production is not just factories. It is natural resources, it's supply chains, it's the tools, it's the seeds, it's the fertilizer, it's everything, right? And the Chinese Communist Party is actively, globally, trying to seize the means of production. All the world's factories, all the world's resources, all the world's homes, all the world's water, all the world's farmland, the seed companies, the fertilizer companies, and guess what? Also, all the natural resources, including especially rare earth minerals. And on that point, it turns out we need one in particular to make ammunition, one of America's favorite markets, ammunition for bullets. And China, well, they have an almost total monopoly on one of the key things we need to make our precious ammunition. They have a monopoly on gallium. And that's not just used for like ammo and stuff, it's used in semiconductors, which, again, we need it for our missiles, folks. We can't build our missiles without gallium. We need it for semiconductors. We need it for the entire defense supply chain. Epoch Times says the United States needs to take action to break up China's near total monopoly on gallium, as failure to do so would send the wrong signals that Beijing could inflict asymmetric pain on the U.S. and allied economies, according to a new report published by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, on July 17th. Meaning, well, we couldn't go to war and fight an actual protracted war because they control all the resources we need to do so. Now, it says that firms and governments are understandably focused on rare earths, but they're ignoring and misunderstanding China's chokehold on gallium, a critical mineral that is crucial to military tech. Brian Hart, Deputy Director and Fellow of the China Power Project at the CSIS, and one of the authors of the report, wrote on X to accompany the release of the report. It says researchers noted that China accounts for 98% of the world's primary supply of gallium, meaning almost all of it. And they say which is not found in its elemental form in nature. Gallium is mainly obtained as a byproduct during the industrial process known as the Bayer process, which turns bauxite into alumina. Meaning, well, that's what we get for giving away all of our factories and all that precious industrial waste product that we need to build missiles and semiconductors. Well, China owns 98% of it, and we need it. Well, what's the solution to that? Well, maybe bringing manufacturing back here and creating all that precious industrial waste for our military here on American soil. Will they do that? Well, the reality is we probably need to, and we'll see if it happens, because that's going to be a process. Trump is saying he wants to bring the factories back, but there is a battle for natural resources. We are now living in a world of Again, asymmetrical warfare. We're not fighting with troops, well, we are also, but not for the most part fighting with troops and bombs and guns. We're doing it through proxy. But I'd say the main force, the main battlefield right now is over precious natural resources. The precious bodily fluids of the United States, right? Our water supply, our precious water, and all of our natural resources being targeted for foreign purchases and being used against us in some regards. Now look, on this point also, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced the Pentagon will drop Chinese involvement in their cloud services. Watch this.
Earlier this week, we were alerted to a potential vulnerability in our DoD computer systems, and we've been checking into it ever since. It turns out that some tech companies have been using cheap Chinese labor to assist with DoD cloud services. This is obviously unacceptable, especially in today's digital threat environment. Now, this was a legacy system created over a decade ago during the Obama administration. But we have to ensure the digital systems that we use here at the Defense Department are ironclad and impenetrable. And that's why today I'm announcing that China will no longer have any involvement whatsoever in our cloud services effective immediately. And at my direction, the department will also initiate, as fast as we can, a 2-week review or faster to make sure that what we uncovered isn't happening anywhere else across the DoD. We will continue to monitor and counter all threats to our military infrastructure and online networks. And I want to thank all those Americans.
Now, this is a big deal. You might remember we covered this recently on the show. What he's saying is basically they were able to confirm some Pentagon services on their IT systems were running through China. And that doesn't seem very secure to me. Normally they try to keep the Chinese out of their networks because they hack them all the time. And it turns out we just were letting them, we were not only letting them do it, we were paying them to do it. And that would create some big problems for national security. And because of that, they're closing the loopholes. A big deal. Hopefully it stays that way. Maybe they'll find other instances of that and close those loopholes as well. He is suggesting they're closing those loopholes and taking it seriously. Now on this point also, farmland, again, the water supply of the United States, all the things we need to function as a nation. It turns out the CCP is not even settled with this. They're also trying to export human rights abuses right here to the United States, suppressing freedom of belief, suppressing freedom of speech, going after people on American soil, and exporting the abuses of a communist state onto our own country. This is happening right now as we speak, and lawmakers in the United States, members of Congress, are now raising the alarm over this. Epoch Times said this: lawmakers on a panel at the U.S. Capitol denounced the Chinese Communist Party's far-reaching campaign of repression in the United States, while commending the targeted group Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa, for its courage. And they said, quote, "It's transnational terrorism as to what they seek to do," referring to the CCP exporting its human rights abuses right here to the United States. What they seek to do, to undermine and to hurt people who are just filled with kindness towards others. Representative Chris Smith, Republican from New Jersey, told a crowd of around 200 at a forum on July 17th titled "Safeguarding Freedom, Countering CCP Transnational Repression." And he added, quote, "There's no boundaries to what this dictatorship, the CCP, will do anywhere and everywhere, and we've got to stand boldly against it, and you are doing that," he told to the crowd. He said, "So I really thank you." Now notes, the event took place 3 days before a key anniversary for Falun Gong, a meditative practice with moral teachings based on the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, also translated as forbearance. On July 20th, 1999, it says the Chinese regime marked the practice for elimination. They wanted to wipe out every single person, kill them all. Since then, it says tens of millions of Falun Gong practitioners have been subjected to arbitrary detention, forced labor, and torture, while the regime uses propaganda to manipulate public opinion against the practice. being repeated even by news outlets right here in the United States, justifying genocide. It says the persecution campaign, along with the regime's state-sanctioned forced organ harvesting from Falun Gong practitioners, has resulted in an untold number of deaths. We don't actually know how many people have been killed by it because, of course, the CCP covers it up, governments don't ask, and media don't tell. They keep it all secret, right? Now, like the big issue right now being exposed more so, the Chinese Communist Party, as things currently stand, the CCP is not even satisfied with keeping the abuses within its own borders. The CCP is trying to export these abuses into other countries. They want to, again, use what they call the three warfares: psychological warfare, media warfare, and legal warfare to target Falun Dafa, Muslim Uyghurs, other groups. Falun Dafa being the main target of this, but I'll tell you right now, once they're through that, they're going to go after the next ones. They're even going after members of Congress, by the way, who speak out about it. Some of them are even getting death threats, which was being discussed. I'll show you in a minute. What the CCP is doing is they're forming false narratives. They're feeding these to news outlets, like New York Times is publishing these things nonstop. And they're using the news outlets to trigger legal investigations. And the problem we have with the CCP is they've been infiltrating all these bodies over the years, the media, different government agencies, and Chinese agents within these agencies and organizations are then working to, again, manipulate our own government to act on the behalf of the Chinese Communist Party. Now, you might say, well, it's not me, it's not my group. Well, the CCP being able to puppeteer our own government, that's something everybody should care about, because while they're targeting Falun Gong right now, they could use this to destroy anybody. They could use this for anything. And as Trump would say, right, they're not after me, they're after you. I'm just in the way. Well, as soon as that's out of the way, they're going to go after someone else. Now, this is Representative Scott Perry, a Republican from Pennsylvania, and the sponsor of the Falun Gong Protection Act, speaking about this. Watch.
Now, you, for your part, you're living in America, and you're enjoying your freedoms, hard-earned, and you're speaking your thoughts, your emotions, your voice. And because of that, and because we live in a free society, unfortunately, the Communist Party of China sends their goons here to monitor you. And heaven forbid you have family members back in China, right? Because the things you do here, they are punished for there. And somehow we allow this to happen in America as well. We allow the threats, the intimidations, bomb threats. There's threats against members of Congress for speaking to you at this event right now. Ladies and gentlemen, completely unacceptable in any normal free society. These people that are engaged in this, and I'm happy to report that I guess the most recent one where the bomb threat against the Falun Gong dance team were convicted and put in jail for these threats. But it has to happen everywhere. The people that come from the Communist Party of China to America to impose their will on us must know that if they do that, if they engage in any of that, they will spend the rest of their lives in prison. That is the remedy to those kind of things. Now, it's hard to get...
Now, look, I would 100% agree. The United States needs to aggressively investigate for Chinese Communist Party agents, especially those who've been infiltrating our own government and infiltrating key businesses and even media organizations. It is shocking, actually, how many reporters, how many business leaders, even within our own government, how many agents there are who've infiltrated different levels. I'm not talking about public-facing people, but even just employees who are working on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party. I've said it many times before. This has been the focus for most of my career, of my work. I've been investigating this aggressively since 2008. This is the greatest threat to the United States. This is how we could lose our country. And I would say the issue of transnational repression, it represents these CCP agents revealing themselves. What is happening right now is, as they're targeting, again, a dissident religious group, all the agents of the Chinese Communist Party, they don't always do this, but they're all showing their hands right now. They're popping their heads out, And the United States has the ability right now to go after all those CCP agents. Or they can go and work with the agents to, again, just work on transnational repression. We'll see which way the United States chooses to go. That said, folks, questions, comments, anything you want to talk about, leave it in the chat. Let's jump into some questions. Let's have a discussion. Former Fly Girl, you're saying, it is my impression that those Chinese let out of their country are 100% loyal commies to the CCP. Yeah, I mean, I understand that sentiment. It's mixed, right? I know I would say there's without a doubt a huge number of people coming from China who are in fact loyal to the Chinese Communist Party. I would actually say that if you just, it's not even hard to find people involved in business working with China, Chinese people coming here, people who are members of Tongs, T-O-N-G-S. Many of them work with the CCP. Many of them openly do it. If you go to San Francisco, it's sickening. For a long time, you had an open CCP agent, a woman named by the name of Rose Pak, who is a known CCP agent, and they called her the Kingmaker of San Francisco. Look it up yourself. It's crazy. Rose Pak, the Kingmaker of San Francisco. You could not get elected in politics in San Francisco without the blessings of a CCP agent. I should say alleged because it was pretty well proven, but she was pretty open about it too. If you go to Chinatowns, you'll see different organizations, the fraternal organizations, the friendship organizations, the hometown associations, right? Organizations that openly work with the CCP, that openly have events all the time with the Chinese consulates, that openly invite American business leaders and politicians and agency heads and Chinese aspiring students who want to move on to get jobs in the FBI and DOJ and IRS and everything else, who are being groomed openly by the Chinese Communist Party. All of this happens in our own backyard, and no, nothing is happening to these people for the most part. They've been allowed to do this in broad daylight with almost no repercussions. To me, this is a massive problem, and there's a lot of them. There's a sickening, massive number of them, and it's just being allowed to happen. Now, does that mean that all Chinese people are part of that? No, totally not. And I mean, I understand the sentiment. Again, look, I know a lot of Chinese dissidents, right? I'm very much part of the community of Chinese dissidents. I have a lot of friends who are Chinese dissidents. I know a lot of people whose family members have been killed by the CCP. I know people who've been tortured by the CCP. I know many people who are very, very vocal. I would say the loudest voices against the Chinese Communist Party. And some of these individuals, they value America, unfortunately, more than most Americans. This was actually when I was pretty young. I remember talking to some of these people. You know, because look, when I was like 20, 21, you know, I was not necessarily like, you know, super patriotic. It was just kind of whatever. But I remember talking about some of the issues in this country when I was like 21 to a Chinese dissident, and the person was like, look, you don't know how good you have it. I can tell you, for a lot of Chinese dissidents, and this is, look, Epoch Times was started by Chinese dissidents, right? We were started by people from China who came here, who wanted to warn America about what's happening in China. We are an example of Chinese Americans who very much value this country, who do not want to see us losing what we are as a nation, who've desperately tried warning Americans and the American government about the threats of the CCP because they know how bad this is, who've raised the alarm of Chinese espionage, saying you are in danger. If you don't do something about it, you are going to lose your country. A lot of the alarms that have been raised, the first voices were from within the Chinese community. And so I would say we would not even be having this conversation were it not for Chinese Americans and people who fled the CCP warning the United States about the threats from the CCP. And so I understand the want to, you know, throw the baby out with the bathwater and just get rid of all of them. But you have a lot of good ones too. I'd say some of the best people we have in this country are people who fled communism and who've tried warning us about it. Really. Another question here, Ashley from California, you're saying, can American companies go buy up Chinese land? Not at all. Which, isn't that ironic, right? Now, Donald Trump has raised this point. He's been saying, look, why do we let them come here? We let Chinese companies lobby our own government, right? You have Chinese companies lobbying the US government. They do it through proxies. They'll go through like an American company. Now look, if you were to lobby our government on behalf of foreign interests, do you know what you would call that? You would call that acting as a foreign agent. And if you don't register as a foreign agent, they will probably arrest you for espionage. Why is it that American businesses can openly do this on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party? And if you understand, they're openly doing this on behalf of the CCP. On one side, covering up human rights abuses for financial interests. Imagine that, right? Covering things up, punishing people who speak about it. Look at the NBA. When the NBA punished a basketball player, Enes Kanter Freedom, for writing a message on his shoe against slavery, as we speak, taking place in China. Yeah, you can kneel on the basketball court against America, but you can't criticize current day slavery because of financial interests. What kind of a country are we living in? What have we become? Why is that allowed to happen? You can get criticized by major, by Hollywood, by major film industries, saying that look how bad America is for all of the historic problems we have. But they bow down and lick the boot of the Chinese Communist Party on every single narrative that they want to push and censor everything they want to have censored. While the CCP is, of course, enslaving people, they have actual slavery. Most of the garment industry is slavery. Most of the cotton industry is slavery in China. Open slavery, re-education through labor, medieval, like Inquisition-style torture. I'm talking stretching racks. I'm talking hanging people by their hands behind their backs until their arms rip out of their sockets. I don't talk about this often, but there are cases of what they do to women who practice Falun Gong in China, where they strip them naked and throw them in the cells of prisoners, of men, and have them get gang raped. And you have groups here talking about women's rights, and they don't care about that. You have journalists with media criticizing this, repeating all the narratives from the CCP, claiming they believe in women's rights, but they will not utter a word about these abuses that many of them know are taking place. There are many cases of women being raped with electric batons by Chinese police as forms of torture, melting their burning their faces off with electric shock batons. There's horrible imagery of this. Where is the outcry? Where are the organizations? Where are the businesses condemning this? All the ones trying to lecture you about, peace and harmony and how dare you have, historical oppression. None of them care about it. None of them criticize this. None of them will utter a word about it. Why is that? It's because they care more about money. And the narratives they have about trying to care about all this stuff, I would say is nothing more than them hating the United States and them loving everything that they claim to oppose because it makes them money. This is the reality. And so I do hope that something is done about this, seriously. I think that we are losing what we are as a nation right before our eyes because the things we stand for. The American idea is an ideal. It's a belief that we have rights given to us by God and that these God-given rights are protected by government. And if government stops protecting those rights, then we lose what we are as a nation. And we're allowing these things to be seized from us right before our eyes. Do we care more about what we stand for, or do we care more about money? That is the real question before us right now. And I do think and I do hope that this will be taken seriously. On that point, I did show you some members of Congress who are very vocal about this. You do have a lot of very good people standing up and very good people speaking out, but you might notice most of the media doesn't even cover it. they don't even cover it. They don't tell you what's happening. They don't quote them. They don't show you these videos. They don't talk about it. And I would seriously ask, why is that? Why is that, right? Candace Harden, you're saying, the market is really bad for Americans due to interest rates, but Chinese buyers buy in cash generally. That's true. I'll explain why. You're saying that they're getting their money out of the country. Yeah, so there's two sides with Chinese purchases. So major purchases, farmland, water supplies, natural resources, anything tied in with like direct foreign investment, all of that is heavily controlled by the CCP. So any company in China working on direct foreign investment, the CCP very, very, very heavily regulates that. They're not allowed to have large foreign investments without the approval of the Chinese Communist Party. Now, normally, that's why we have CFIUS. That's why the US government has in place an organization, a branch of our government, or an agency of our government, to review foreign purchases to make sure it does not represent a national security threat, CFIUS. Now, normally, if you have a foreign purchase tied in with the Chinese Communist Party, they would not allow it, right? Look, if you were to even, you can't even migrate here if you're a member of a foreign communist organization. It sounds like Cold War stuff, but it's still in the questionnaire. Trump is even talking about pulling people's citizenship, denaturalizing people if they've lied about this. It's pretty serious, right? And so you have companies now being bought up with direct ties to a foreign communist party. Now, normally CFIUS would do something about it. Why are they not doing anything about this? That could actually, if they choose to invoke it, my personal take, that could be used as grounds to seize back some things that have been purchased by Chinese companies. But on the point of what Candace Harden says, so not all of these things are tied to the CCP. Not all foreign purchases are tied to it. A big part of it also is Chinese nationals and Chinese business people trying to get their money out of China. They don't trust the Chinese economy. Look, okay, let's put it this way. What is the annual GDP growth of China that you're not allowed to question? 3.5% GDP growth. They all clap. All the foreign investors bark like seals, and they do the seal thing, right? And everybody goes along with it because they make money off it. In reality, they all know it's a giant Ponzi scheme. Why is that? It's because every time they try to audit it, the auditors get investigated or arrested by the CCP. The Chinese Communist Party will prosecute you as a spy if you even question the GDP numbers in China. And every time they do, in fact, audit a Chinese business, they find they were cooking the books and lying. It's a giant Ponzi scheme. But a lot of people play along with it because they want to make money. Now, the Chinese people know this. The Chinese businessmen especially know this. And so all the people in China who very much know that it's a giant Ponzi scheme, a fake house of cards that could collapse at any moment, what do they do with their money? Well, do you want to have all your money in the Ponzi scheme, or do you want to put it in something else? Well, the answer is put it in something else. And so what do? They try to buy hard assets. They try to put their money in US dollars. A lot of them have been buying cryptocurrencies. The CCP is really trying hard to stop that from happening. They have all kinds, the digital yuan was part of that. They want to stop the outflow of cash. They'll buy gold, they'll buy diamonds, and they'll buy real estate. And so you have a lot of people coming here and just trying desperately to buy up as much as they can of hard assets, which is why you have people coming here with like literal suitcases of cash, hard cash. I'll buy every property you have, because they're trying to get their money out of China. Sometimes it's not directly through them. Sometimes they do it through family members. Maybe their kid is studying abroad. In Canada, that was a big deal, for example. A lot of the purchases of homes, getting around some of the Canadian regulations, was through people on like visas or people here as students and so on. and they have them buy properties on behalf of their family. Same thing with the Chinese Communist Party doing it here, with Chinese nationals doing it here. It's happening a lot. Now, in my take, that wouldn't be that big of a deal if you could build homes as fast as people are buying them. There are some people who don't want to do that because, it's whether you like it or not, houses are regarded as a financial asset and a form of investment, which is why banks buy them up so much, right? And so they want the prices to go up, not down. How do you make the prices go up? Well, you create demand. Maybe you want to have mass migration to increase the number of people demanding a finite asset. You can artificially inflate the cost by doing so. Or you restrict the amount on the market and you allow for foreign purchases. So you don't have to bring people here per se to buy the properties. You just allow people in other countries to buy them, and you try to put a squeeze on the ability to build new ones. That makes it so that the prices stay high, maybe go higher, and people have to compete for those finite resources. Terrible for us, good for them, but that's the way it works when you allow houses to become investment pieces, right? Look, again, it's I know a lot of people make money off it, but it's just the way it is, I guess, right? Denise B., you're saying China may need to import water that's not been polluted by lead. That's a great point, Denise B. So, okay, I'm working on some more. As you know, I'm doing a lot of investigations. Aside from doing my show every day, as all the regulars here know, I'm not a desktop journalist. I get out on the field quite a bit. One of the reasons why we didn't have a show yesterday, I was traveling for interviews. You'll see me often reporting and doing the show from hotel rooms all across the country and sometimes in different parts of the world. I don't like being a desktop journalist. I'm not just, I don't want to be a talking head, you know what I mean? So I still get out and I do investigations. I like to go boots on the ground. I like to see things for myself. I like to find things nobody's talking about. And I like to tell you all about it because that's my job, right? I'm looking right now into some issues around China buying up farmland. And one thing that I came across, and it's funny, I reported on it at the time, but I forgot about it. Last year, Congress was investigating China infiltrating and influencing the U.S. government. And Congress actually called in to testify the heads of 24 U.S. government agencies. Among them was the head of the USDA, right? The Department of Agriculture. And I was rereading the whole report on it the other day. And man, it's funny. I totally forgot this happened. But in that report, they were bringing up the Chinese purchases of farmland and why it was happening. And to Denise B.'s point, what they were saying was this. They were saying that China has a crisis of natural resources. They're dealing with massive water pollution. A lot of the water in China is just insanely polluted. Now that's a problem for people drinking it, but that's also a problem for cattle. That's a problem for farming. That's a problem for everything because, it's not just humans who consume water, it's plants and it's animals. They're also dealing with the loss of fertile soil. China, despite being a very large country, even historically, does not have a lot of farmland. This is one of the reasons why even historically, not even under the CCP, historically they've always had problems of famine. You could say Europe has had the same thing. You've had a lot of famines in history. This is something that makes the United States very unique. America is a blessed country. And I'm not just saying that because I'm some super patriot, which is also true, but not just for that reason. America is a very blessed country. We have so much resources here. About half of the United States is farmland. You don't have that almost, I don't think you have that anywhere else in the world. So much of America is fertile land. It's incredible. We have so much fertile land. We have so much open land. We have the ability of just livestock and game and wild animals. It's incredible. And unfortunately, that also makes us a target, and we're not doing enough to protect against it. So, aside from not having a lot of farmland to begin with, the CCP is also dealing with the fact that a lot of their once fertile farmland is no longer fertile. They have two regions. They're called black soil regions, and most of their farming is done in those regions. The fertile soil is going away. It's almost gone. They're facing a food crisis already. They cannot produce enough food domestically to feed their own population. They have to import it. So any kind of crops, they don't have enough for it. Add to that the problem of really just ongoing floods. I haven't reported on it for a while because I'd just be showing you videos every day of floods in China, which those of you who've watched Crossroads for a while, you might remember I used to show you a lot of this stuff. They're having tons of floods, crazy floods, all the time. And they're also having droughts all the time. And so it's too much water or not enough water, and it's killing their crops all the time. They're having a food crisis. Add to that the other problems. What are the main meat products in China? Well, it's fish, it's seafood. They've already destroyed a lot of their ecosystem around fishing, which is why the Chinese fishing ships are encroaching on the Philippines, and they're encroaching on South America, and they're destroying the fishing ecosystems in other countries. Right? A huge issue that not a lot of people talk about. They destroyed the ecosystem for fishing. And so they're going elsewhere, and they're destroying the ecosystems elsewhere. Then they have the problem where the land animals they eat, the main meat they will eat would be pork. They're very much a pork-eating nation. They eat pork and they eat chicken, right? They eat everything, but those are the two biggest ones, right? What do they have? They have the swine flu and they have the avian flu. They had to wipe out a lot of their livestock. They had to cull just massive amounts of livestock. And so what have they had to do to fill that? They buy it from other countries. What did they do here? They bought up, in America, we have 4 main companies that do almost all of our meat processing. One of those is majority owned by China, 2 of them are majority owned by Brazil, and one of the majority owned Brazil ones is mostly owned by China also. They're buying up our meat processors. We have chickens being processed in China and packaged in China. Why are we processing our pork in China when they're having swine flu and they can do the old bait and switch and send us the poison? Let that sink in. Why are we letting that happen, right? Now you understand, back to this report, just to paint this whole picture, understand why are they buying up our farmland? It's because they need our farms. They need our food. They need our water, and they need our food, and they need our resources. And what you're having happen now, don't take my word for it. Last year, the congressional report talked about this. They said that China wants to control the American food supply. That's why they're doing it. And the concern is, in the future, they might weaponize our own food against us. Whoever controls the food controls the masses, right? Hey, you wanna eat tomorrow? Play the game. And look, they're already doing it to us with rare earth minerals. This is what they're doing. They're buying up. They're not buying up all of our farms. They're trying to, and a lot of this went through the roof during the last 4 years. Over the last 4 years, this is just exponentially increased, meaning they're going at it really aggressively right now. The land they're buying up, it's next to like key resources, it's next to American military bases, but it's also some of our most fertile land. And this is a threat to our entire country. It really is. Really, really is. Now, I should note, the American government is aware of this. The Trump administration recently, they had a big press conference. You had Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. You had the head of the USDA. You had Sarah Huckabee Sanders, right, Arkansas governor. You had representatives coming out. they're very much raising the alarm over this. It was a lot of them all at once. They're very much raising the alarm over it, and they're moving to do something about it. And you're going to be hearing a lot more about it, because they're deeming this now finally a national security threat, and they're trying to stop it. So they are waking up to this threat. They're very much aware of it. And I'm going to be talking more about it. I'm currently looking into some of this stuff. So I know I've been talking for a while that I'm working on investigations again. The reason a lot of media don't want to hire investigative reporters is because investigations take a while. But I can tell you, I'm very prolific with this. So I'm going to have some good stuff for you all soon. That said, let me know what you think, folks. What do you think about, I don't know, China, businesses doing business with China? Some people believe that we should go scorched earth. Gordon Cheng, if you talk to him, he says the only solution is to completely decouple from the CCP. We should not be doing business with the CCP. They openly state we're their number one enemy. They say that they cannot coexist on the same earth with the United States. They use financial interests to influence our government and to control businesses and to control media. Should we allow that to happen? Or is it that, we're trading partners, we need each other, good old business, right? Free market. What do you believe is best? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious what y'all have to say. That said, join me again tomorrow for some more great discussions. There's always more going on than we could possibly talk about. The joys or the curse of living in a very interesting time, right? There's no shortage of news these days. Join me again tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll have some more great discussions. And that said, until then, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.